In the 12th century, when the air of England still trembled with prayers and superstition, men named their fears with the same ease they named their saints. The land was restless then, scarred by hunger, faith, and memory. And in a village called Woolpit, where the fields met the shadow of the church tower, the earth chose one dawn to give something back. It began in silence, a dawn thin as parchment. The fog lay low, and the crows had not yet spoken. From a pit once dug to snare wolves, two children rose, a boy and a girl, small, pale yet shimmering faintly green, like leaves catching light beneath the soil. They did not cry, they did not run. They simply stood, gazing upon the world as if it were a story they had only ever heard told. The villagers came with fear disguised as curiosity, rough hands clutching tools, holy words muttered under breath. One man reached toward the children. The boy recoiled, but the girl met his gaze without flinching. Her eyes were clear, calm, unblinking. Eyes that had seen something older than the sun. Then, a bell. One toll, thin as glass, carried on wind that should not have been there. The villagers crossed themselves. The girl tilted her head, listening not toward heaven, but downward, as though the sound had come from beneath the earth. They were taken from the pit to the village, given food, shelter, names. But of all that was offered, they would touch only one thing, a bowl of broad beans. They tore the pods open with trembling hands and ate as if rediscovering a memory long buried. From that moment, they belonged to Woolpit, though not truly. To the people, they were omen or miracle, sin or wonder. The priest saw danger, the farmer saw pity. The world had found what it could not explain, and so it called them by the simplest name it could bear, the Green Children. Thus began a story whispered through centuries, of two small souls who stepped out of darkness and into a world unready to see itself reflected in their eyes. I wrote what they told me, for I was there when the bell first rang. There was a time when the world was smaller, when its edges still whispered with fear. A time when men believed that every hollow in the earth hid a secret, and every sound beyond the fields belonged to something not quite human. It was an age when the sky felt closer, and the soil beneath one's feet could still remember the shape of God's hand. In such an age, a century half swallowed by famine and faith, there lay a small village called Woolpit. There the land was quiet. Wolves had been driven into legend, and the pits dug to catch them lay abandoned. Dark mouths in the fields, waiting for something else to fall in, or crawl out. And so it happened, on a morning thin as a breath, that the earth exhaled its strangest secret. The dawn came gray and cold, the kind that bleeds the world of color. The fog hung low like unspoken prayer, and the farmers, bowed men, heavy with habit, moved through the mist as shadows. Their tools rang faintly, iron against frost. Then one man stopped. He had heard a sound, not a cry, not a rustle, but something gentler, like breath beneath the soil. He peered into the pit. There, at the lip of churned earth, crouched two figures, small still, unreal. A boy and a girl. Barely alive, yet too strange to be dead. Their faces were childlike, but their skin held the faint hue of living leaves, that pale green which glows between sunlight and shade. Their clothes shimmered with a weave no loom in England could make, threads dull as pewter, but glinting faintly, as if remembering starlight. They did not weep, they did not speak. They simply looked upon the man, their eyes wide, not with terror, but with the quiet curiosity of creatures seeing the world for the first time. The man fell to his knees, his breath caught. He reached out a hand, rough from toil, trembling from faith. The boy shrank back, startled, clutching at the girl's sleeve. But she did not move. She only blinked once, slowly, like a cat measuring the trust of a stranger. And then, from nowhere and everywhere, a bell rang, a single, distant toll, thin, hollow, as if it had traveled from beneath the ground itself. Once, then twice, the sound drifted through the fog, winding through the field like a summons or a warning. The villagers froze. The man's hand fell, and the children, Oh, the children turned their faces not toward the sound, but downward, as though the bell were calling from the deep earth that had borne them. They were carried back to the village, half in awe, half in fear. No one knew what to call them. No one knew if they should. They were offered bread. They turned away. Water. They would not drink. Fruit, meat, grain, all refused. But when a bowl of broad beans was set upon the table, fresh, green, simple, something within them stirred. Their small hands trembled as they reached for it, splitting the pods open with reverence, devouring the seeds as if they had been starved of the earth's memory. It was the first sound they made, not words but the sound of eating, a reminder that hunger, at least, is universal. By dusk, the village was restless. People gathered in knots, whispering, crossing themselves. An old woman spat over her shoulder twice and muttered that green was the color of the devil. The priest shut his doors and prayed longer than usual, and the lord of the manor, hearing the tale, sent for the children, perhaps out of mercy, perhaps out of pride, perhaps because men of rank cannot bear a mystery unsolved by commoners. They were taken into his house, given warmth and name and pity, and thus began the long measure of their days among us. Days of watching, of wondering, of fearing that in their eyes lay some unspoken truth about our own world. We, the keepers of reason, made them into fable so that we might sleep. Our tongues turned them into myth, even as our hands clothed and fed them. For if they were only story, we could pretend they were never real. But they were real, two small lives drawn from the pit between faith and terror. Two questions the earth had the mercy or the cruelty to ask aloud. They came from the ground, as if the soil itself had remembered something it wished to return. And I have written what was told, for I was there when the bell first rang. Sir Richard of Wykes was not a cruel man. He had seen famine, pestilence, and men undone by greed, and so his heart had softened in the way that old oak bends, not breaks. When word reached him of two strange children found in the wolf pits, he did not laugh as others did, nor did he cross himself and turn away. He sent for them. That evening, as dusk pooled like ink in the corners of his hall, the children were brought before him, two small shapes lit by a single fire. The hearth spat and cracked, its light unsteady, and for a moment he thought they shimmered, as if the very air around them breathed differently. Their eyes caught the firelight like glass, and their silence filled the room more completely than sound. Sir Richard, uncertain of what courtesy one owes to miracles or misfortunes, bade his steward bring food. Bread was laid, broth was poured. The smell of roasted meat filled the hall. Yet they did not move. The boy turned away. The girl stared, polite but unmoved, as though the offerings were tokens from a foreign faith. It was only when a servant, a young maid named Mary, kind despite her fear, placed before them a small bowl of broad beans that their stillness broke. The boy reached first. The girl followed. They peeled the pods with trembling fingers, ate the green seeds within, and for the first time since their discovery, seemed almost alive. They ate not like beggars nor like guests, but like pilgrims who had found the relic they had sought across lifetimes. Each bean lifted to their lips was reverence, not hunger. Sir Richard watched, and in that quiet he felt an unease that mercy alone could not soothe. He was a man who believed that all things have order, kings and subjects, priests and sinners, the living and the dead. But what do you call those who do not belong to any of these? They were given a place by the fire that night. The girl sat cross-legged, her small hands cupped before the flame, eyes fixed not on its warmth, but on its color. The boy, frailer, coughed softly, his thin chest shivering under the weight of the air. His finger tapped the rushes, a rhythm that was not music, but memory, too precise to be random, too alien to be human. The hall breathed around them, the crackle of fire, the whisper of servants crossing themselves behind half-closed doors. The smell of iron and smoke lingered, the scent of a house learning how to host the impossible. Outside, the village whispered. By starlight, men gathered on the green. Black shapes against silver sky, their words coiling like smoke. Fear is the first crop a story grows. By night's end, the tale had already changed hands a dozen times. Some swore they were fae, children of the hollow hills. Others said they were the spawn of sin, marked by their green flesh and a strange appetite. A few, softer of heart, murmured they might be wanderers from a far country, lost through the mercy or mischief of God. But names once spoken take root. Fairy taken, devil touched, unbaptized. Fear trades quickly in such currency, and the villagers were eager merchants. The priest watched from the edge of the crowd, his hands clasped tight. He had baptized infants, buried the old, spoken of redemption and damnation. But nowhere in his holy books had he read of green children. His face, lit by moonlight, was neither faith nor disbelief, but something quieter. Something that looked like doubt. A dog barked. A child pointed. "The strangers," he whispered, and was hushed. And somewhere beyond the murmurs, beyond the walls of Sir Richard's hall, the bell tolled again. Not loud, almost muffled, as though heard through water or dream. The sound seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. From the stone of the tower, the roots of the earth, the hollow in the children's chests. Within the hall, the girl lifted her head. Her eyes glimmered faintly, not with reflection but recognition. She listened, utterly still, her face unreadable. And when the bell faded, she lowered her gaze to the dying fire. In that moment, even Sir Richard felt the weight of something vast and unseen pressing gently against the walls of his world. He turned from her and crossed himself, though he did not know why. The servants whispered later that the air had changed that night, that the fire had burned with a hue unseen before, that the girl's shadow lingered too long upon the wall. But the chroniclers, such as I, write only what can be written. And yet, I remember the sound of that bell. Soft, sorrowful, impossibly near. Sickness in those days came like dusk. Slow, certain, inevitable. It did not announce itself with thunder or wail. It simply arrived as the night does and waited for the last light to surrender. So it came for the boy, the one who had eaten so eagerly when first found, who had reached for every green thing with trembling, grateful hands. His hunger had seemed endless then, like the earth reclaiming what was once its own. But appetite fades where warmth falters, and soon he began to thin. First his voice went, though no one could say if he had ever truly spoken. Then his strength, then little by little, the strange green faded from his skin, like the last whisper of spring dying beneath frost. Sir Richard's steward, a man untrained in tenderness, brought water and cool cloths. The priest prayed, though softly as if unsure which God should hear, and the girl, unsilent as always, sat by his side and laid her hand upon his arm. She did not cry. She did not beg. She only watched him, her small face tilted toward his breath, her eyes vast and still, as if she were studying how death worked, as if she were trying to learn the shape of it, the way she had learned every other thing in this strange world. When fever took his mind, he spoke in the language no one understood, not the harshness of delirium, but the calm rhythm of homecoming. Perhaps he was calling out for that twilight country he had once described, a place of neither sun nor shadow, where the light hung still and green. The girl leaned close and began to hum, a low, trembling note that rose and fell in patterns too delicate for grief. It was not our hymn. It was something older and gentler and terribly lonely. The servants crossed themselves. The priest looked away, and when the boy's chest ceased its small, uneven motion, even the fire in the hearth seemed to lower its flame, as though the house itself had exhaled. We buried him at first light. No great procession, no weeping crowd, only a handful of souls who stood because duty or pity required it. The wind moved softly among the stones. The linen shroud, wrapped tightly, revealed nothing but the outline of a child who had never belonged to this world. Sir Richard said no prayer. The priest's lips moved, but no sound came out. Some griefs are too small to be believed, too large to be spoken. We marked him in earth, as men do, because we have no other means of holding on to what leaves us. And the sky, indifferent as ever, did not crack. The girl stood apart, barefoot in the morning chill. She looked at the mound of turned soil as if waiting for it to breathe again. Then slowly, She reached out and pressed her hand to the rough stone placed there, to name what could not be named. Her fingers lingered, and in her eyes, there was something reflected that none of us saw. Perhaps the memory of another place, another sunless sky, perhaps the faint echo of a bell still tolling beneath the world. After that day, she did not speak for a long while, but silence, too, can be a kind of language. She moved through Sir Richard's house like smoke, learning, watching, repeating. When the steward sewed torn cloth, she followed each motion, mimicking the turn of his wrist. When the maid spoke, she echoed the sounds, staccato and broken, testing the edges of each word like one learning to taste color. Her tongue stumbled, her voice caught, but she persisted. And as her voice grew surer, something else changed. The faint tint of green that once marked her skin began to pale. Day by day it receded, until only her eyes kept the old hue, a trace of that other realm she could not name. Where one story closed, another began, quieter, lonelier. For she was not the girl who had come from the earth anymore. She was becoming something new, something almost human. We who watched could not decide whether it was a blessing or a theft. Some whispered that she was a miracle, a sign that grace could reach beyond the known world. Others muttered that she was a trick, a changeling now wearing the skin of innocence to deceive us. But to me, she was simply what she had always been. A question that the living asked of the dead, and that the dead in their silence refused to answer. Still, when I close my eyes, I hear her song, that fragile sound she made in the night as the boy's breath faded. It was not sorrow nor comfort, but remembrance. And though the centuries have buried her name, I remember that sound, because I was there, in the room, when the light went out, and I heard her humming the world back into silence. By the time her tongue had learned the shape of our words, she no longer sounded like a child. There was weight in her voice, the kind that does not belong to youth but to distance, as though every word she spoke had walked a long road to reach us. The priest asked her gently, almost afraid to break the stillness between them, "Where did you come from, child?" She paused, folding her small hands as one does before prayer. Her eyes shimmered, not from tears but from something within, something remembering. And then she spoke carefully, as if carving truth into the air. "From a place where the sun never rose. There the light is dim and everyone is green." We followed a sound, a bell, and the ground opened. That was all. No tremor, no plea. Just a plain statement of impossible things. Her words were simple, but they carried the weight of a map we had never drawn, a world we had never believed could be. The priest sat frozen. His pen hovered above the ledger, dripping ink onto the page like slow rain. He wanted to ask more. Where this place was, how far, under what sky, but something in her stillness warned him not to. For a moment, the air itself seemed to lean closer, as though the room had become a border between worlds. And in the silence that followed, her voice began to paint that unseen land. She spoke of a country where light never changed. Not night, not day, but a constant dusk that held the world in gentle suspense. A land without shadow where color never deepened nor died. There were rivers, she said, wide as memory, running with silver that caught the glow of that twilight sky. The water was quiet, but beneath its surface drifted the reflections of beings not quite seen, their forms trembling like breath upon glass. She spoke of fields that shone, though no sun touched them, lit by a strange pallor that made the air shimmer, and of figures who moved through that light, their skin like the moss on old stone, their gestures slow, graceful, sorrowful. They did not work the land, she said. They tended it, as if caring for something alive and dreaming. And over it all there was a sound, not music, not wind, but a tone, layered and endless, resonant as if the world itself were ringing. It was not a church bell, though it might have been what church bells try to imitate, a sound so pure that it filled every corner of their sky, and yet somehow came from nowhere at all. And when that sound began to change, to swell, to call, the people of her world lifted their heads. She and her brother, curious, followed the echo through the silver fields and into the hollows between hills. The light dimmed there. The air trembled. They stepped forward, and the ground opened. Then came darkness. Then came silence. Then came us. She stopped there. Her hands, which had been resting in her lap, moved now, slowly, delicately, shaping an invisible curve in the air, as if tracing the rim of a bell that no one else could see. "We followed the sound," she whispered. "We lost our path. We fell out of the world." The priest, who had spent his life naming miracles and denying them, could not speak. He wrote one line in his book: crooked, hesitant, uncertain. Then he looked at her, and for the first time since he had taken his vows, he seemed unsure of where heaven ended. Outside, the evening bells began to ring for vespers, the familiar sound of faith, mortal and thin. But inside the room she did not move. Her eyes flickered, not toward the tower, but toward the floor, as if listening for something older, deeper. Some said she was a liar, that her words were fever or fancy. Some said she was cursed, that such beauty must be a disguise for wickedness. Others said she was only a child repeating dreams she could not understand. But none of them saw what I saw. For in her eyes there remained a memory, quiet and unwavering, of a home that had never known dawn. A place where the sky and the earth were one color, where rivers whispered instead of flowing, and where a bell once rang not to summon, but to promise. A sound that had once called her name and lost her to us forever. Years pass quietly in England. Seasons fold upon themselves, and the land remembers more kindly than men do. The wolves are gone, the pits are overgrown, and the fields hum with the same low patience they always had. And yet, some stories do not fade. They linger like a scent in old wood, like a color that refuses to die beneath the sun. The girl, no, the woman now, still walks the edge of Woolpit's fields when the light turns amber. Her hair has taken the pale of harvest straw. Her hands, once small and trembling, move with the grace of one who has learned the rhythm of work. To the eyes of strangers, she is nothing remarkable. Another woman among many, stirring pots, folding linens, tending to soil and silence. But those of us who remember, who saw what the earth once gave us, cannot look upon her without seeing what lingers beneath. Time has washed the green from her skin, but not from her eyes. When the sun dips low and catches them just right, a glint still flashes there, not the color of emerald nor leaf, but something subtler, like the ghost of a hue the world no longer knows. She lived among us, neither wholly ours nor wholly of the thing that bore her. She took our words, our food, our ways, and yet she was never of them. There was a quiet precision to her every gesture, as though she were repeating something she had learned elsewhere, in another light. When she stirred the evening meal, her fingers moved with deliberate care, the way a priest handles relics. When the bells of the church rang for vespers, she tilted her head slightly, not in prayer, but in listening, as though beneath those human chimes, she could still hear a deeper tone calling from far below. Children played near the pit where she had once been found. They would glance at it sometimes, half curious, half afraid. But the pit was only a hole now, choked with grass and time. No one remembered that it had once been a doorway. We, the older ones, spoke less of her with each year. We tucked the story away, placed it in that quiet cabinet where we keep all things that trouble certainty. We called her by a name that was not hers, and gave her a house, and told ourselves that she belonged. But belonging is a word the world invented for comfort. What she carried was not comfort, but reminder. We fed her with our food and she took it. We taught her our prayers and she whispered them softly, though her eyes were never on heaven when she spoke. We gave her a place, but every place we gave her was also a cage. Sometimes at twilight, she would walk to the well at the edge of the village. There she would lean over and look into the water, still and black. Once I followed. I saw her reflection shimmer, and for an instant, the water did not show our gray sky, but something else, a soft green light, trembling, alive, like memory taking shape. She touched the water then and smiled, not as one recalling joy nor sorrow, but as one who recognizes the truth of her own existence. A smile that said, "Yes, I remember, and it is enough." People asked, in time, what it had meant, Her coming, her staying. What was gained by such a visitation? Was she a warning or a gift? A sign of mercy or mistake? No priest could answer. No scholar dared to. But those of us who had seen her, truly seen her, understood something small and terrible, that the world is not bounded by our fields, nor by our faith, nor even by our fear, that there are doors that open only once, that some sounds once heard will haunt the heart beyond reason. We live within walls we cannot see, and sometimes, rarely, something from beyond those walls steps through, just long enough to remind us that the walls are there. The bell rings still, fainter now, carried on winds that touch neither heaven nor earth. The woman turns from the well, her hair gilded by the dying light. She walks back toward the village, steady, unhurried, and with every step, the color of her shadow deepens until dusk swallows her whole. The fields fall silent again. Only the bell remains, its echo fading into a stillness that feels eternal. And I write what I can, because I saw her once, at the edge of the field, where light met memory, and in her eyes the world was green again.